And so if there's compromise in one part, the whole structure is going to reflect that tensional pattern, and the integrity is going to be affected in the system. And so one interesting thing we do in Polarity is we do this holding this awareness of the whole. And so we're not ever just working in, like some types of massage go really in depth in just one part. And I have some clients seeing a physical therapist, and the physical therapist has a prescription work on the shoulder and they will not work on the hips because of that. But it's like, in my view, that hip is what's holding this tension pattern in place in the shoulder. So just if you hold your shoulders and just tune into the whole and think about this flow of energy and relationship between the whole of the body and this part, this two-way exchange, some energy might start to move. There might be some adjustment that starts to happen in the tissue. This is without any pressure or any force, just satvik. And you can play with this in your work. I mean, play with going more in depth locally with your attention into the tissue pattern, and then maybe go into the more global, wider field. And then you can move in between them. Let your attention kind of be guided by your intuition of sort of like, what's the right depth or the right place to tune in. And I think often you will be guided to a place that will help. It may be dynamic, your attention might move in and out, but ultimately you'll be guided into a place that's going to resolve these tensional patterns and restore the integrity of the whole. So Dr. Stone has a quote: "Man's internal gravity lines are his energy patterns. These are as definite as external gravity." Because there's a lot of different kinds of structural bodywork that really focus on how does the body relate to gravity, and like how is the body being pulled down and pulled in certain ways. But Dr. Stone's point is that our energy lines, the midline and the long lines and the transverse currents and these other kind of different 5-pointed star, 6-pointed star, different patterns of lines of energy in the body, these are a kind of gravity that are reflective of the soul energy. And say there's some pattern that's created, a pattern of anger, maybe something more mental, emotional, that's going to pull these gravity lines in such a way that maybe there's a certain accumulation of force around the liver or the digestive organs here, the fiery organs. It's going to have a certain pull on maybe the front to back relationship of the body or the right to left. This is a kind of gravity that's pulling the body into a certain shape that's also dealing with the force of gravity at the same time. And so when we come in with our energy therapy, and we're not just working with the tissue, we're working with the soul, we're working with that individual inhabiting the body, and not just working through touch, but also through listening, through presence, through communication, through awareness. As we start to support the person on all levels to become more present to themselves, presence is the medium through which life energy flows, then these tensional patterns start to resolve. This is the negative pole, the crystallization of our experience that hasn't been fully processed, whether it's childhood trauma or whether it's injury or something else that just hasn't fully resolved. It accumulates in this negative pole as a crystallized kind of energy that shows up as tension patterns in the body, but also shows up as tension patterns in the personality, like the edges, your edges of how you respond to people, how you respond to stress. Maybe you habitually go into a certain pattern of reaction or emotional reaction, and then that emotional reaction creates certain kinds of physiological reactions in the organs and certain structural patterns in the tissue. So from our perspective, this is all just different layers of energy. And as we make inquiry and come into relationship with it, these tensional patterns start to come more into balance or resolve. And through that, the soul consciousness is able to be expressed more freely through the mind and body of the individual. So I always thought this was so interesting when I found this picture. This is a rare picture that I somehow inherited. I said, this isn't like the polarity therapy I learned. I mean, in my first training, I was just like rubbing the feet and they were lying down. And, I was like, what is he doing here? With these skeletons in the background. And now I know, going into that, it's like, this is a different style of structural work that I think has been lost in a lot of A lot of Polarity practitioners aren't really trained in this particularly, but I think there's a lot of what Dr. Stone was doing was looking at these connective tissue tensional patterns and how they inform energy, and vice versa, how energy informs them, how the personality, the soul, the mind field is being expressed through the tissue.